Welcome back to Smart and Crazy, the podcast where we delve into the most interesting, mind bending, and occasionally controversial topics out there. And today we're diving deep into the digital wild west of file sharing, the rise and fall of torrenting, and the ever evolving landscape of piracy.
Well, hold on, Sarah. You're already throwing some heavy words around. Wild West digital seas pirates. Let's take a step back for a second. I mean, we're talking about downloading music and movies. It's not like we're talking about robbing banks or something.
Laughs, okay, okay, you're right. It's not quite the same as a frontier shootout, but think about it. Back in the early days of the internet, the rules were different. There weren't a lot of legal options for accessing music and movies, especially if you didn't want to spend a fortune on CDs or wait forever for a download. So people turned to peer file sharing, and torrenting became a major phenomenon.
Yeah, I remember those days. LimeWire, Kazaa, Napster. These were the names that ruled the internet. It was like a digital playground where you could get almost anything you wanted for free.
And it was surprisingly efficient. Remember those days when it took hours to download a single song on dial up? Suddenly, you could download entire albums in seconds. It was a revolution in terms of access.
But as with most things, the party had to end eventually. The music industry wasn't going to let us steal their bread and butter, so they unleashed the lawyers.
That's right. Napster was the first to fall, and then LimeWire, the Recording Industry Association of America, or the RIAA, went after them with everything they had, suing for billions of dollars in damages.
It was a massive overreach. They were throwing around ridiculous figures like $75 trillion dollars in damages against LimeWire. That's more than the GDP of the entire world at the time.
It was truly absurd, but what's even more interesting is that they weren't just targeting the platforms, they went after individual users too.
Remember that story about the mom who got sued for $250,000 because her kid downloaded? So, the RIA was practically throwing lawsuits at anyone they could find who had a remote connection to file sharing.
It was a dark chapter in the history of the internet. They used the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, or the DMCA, to justify their actions, but the law was misinterpreted to target users who were downloading music.
The DMCA was supposed to protect intellectual property, but it became a tool for the RIA to crush anyone who dared to challenge their control over digital content.
And it wasn't just the RIAA. The movie studios were getting in on the action too. They were trying to shut down websites like the Pirate Bay, but they couldn't seem to catch the founders. It was like a game of cat and mouse.
It was a classic case of David and Goliath, a bunch of tech savvy individuals fighting against the behemoths of the entertainment industry.
And for a while, it felt like they were winning, but the tables started to turn when streaming services like Netflix and Spotify hit the scene.
The convenience factor was undeniable. You could suddenly watch movies and listen to music legally without having to download anything or worry about viruses, and it was relatively affordable.
Netflix was a game changer. It was one of the first platforms to offer a vast library of content for a monthly subscription fee. It was a no brainer for most people.
But remember, in those early days, Netflix was still pretty limited. You couldn't get everything you wanted on it. I still had to rely on torrents for certain movies and shows.
That's true, but the streaming landscape has changed dramatically since then. Now we have a plethora of options with services like Amazon Prime, Hulu, Disney, and more.
But here's the thing, as these services become more popular, they also become more expensive. We're talking about multiple subscriptions per month adding up to a significant amount of money.
That's where the irony comes in. The rise of streaming services has led to a resurgence of piracy. People are tired of paying for multiple subscriptions, so they're turning to illegal streaming sites to get what they want.
It's like a never ending cycle. The industry tries to crack down on piracy, but they also create a situation where people are incentivized to pirate. It's a complex issue with no easy answers.
You're right. It's a delicate balance between protecting intellectual property and providing users with affordable and convenient access to digital content.
So, where do you think this is all going? Is piracy going to become even more sophisticated, or will streaming services eventually become so affordable that piracy becomes irrelevant?
That's a great question. And I think it's a bit of both. Piracy will always exist in some form, but the methods will evolve. New technologies will emerge and pirates will adapt.
But I also think there's a growing trend towards personalized streaming services where you can create a custom library of content based on your own preferences. That could make piracy less appealing, as people can get what they want without having to resort to illegal means.
It's a fascinating future to imagine, But for now, we're still grappling with the challenges of digital piracy. It's an ongoing battle, and it's a topic that we'll continue to explore on Smart and Crazy.
And as always, we want to hear from you. What are your experiences with torrenting and piracy? What do you think the future holds for digital content sharing? Let us know in the comments below.
Until next time, stay curious and stay crazy.
Before we go, I want to touch on a really interesting fact about the game Elden Ring.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. From Software, the developers, actually poisoned the game for players who downloaded illegal copies. They made the game incredibly difficult and even deleted player progress. It was hilarious and brilliant.
That's a bold move. It just goes to show you, even in the digital age, there are ways to fight back against piracy.
And it actually worked. The pirates were so frustrated, and the legal version of the game was incredibly successful.
But let's go back to the bigger picture, the relationship between streaming services and piracies. A complex one. We've talked about the convenience of streaming, but what about the costs?
You're right, the streaming model is a double edged sword. On one hand, it's incredibly convenient and offers a huge variety of content. On the other hand, the costs are piling up. We're talking multiple subscriptions per month, which can quickly add up.
And that's where the tension lies. The industry is pushing for more streaming options, but is it pushing people away from legal options with these prices?
Exactly, it's a balancing act. They need to make money, but they also need to keep their audience engaged and satisfied.
I think the future of streaming depends on finding a way to make it more affordable and accessible for everyone. Maybe a system where you can mix and match services, or a tiered pricing system based on your needs.
That's a good point. There are definitely opportunities for innovation in the streaming space.
But we also have to consider the ethics of piracy. Is it really stealing, or is it simply a way for people to access content they can't afford?
It's a gray area, isn't it? I mean, there's no question that piracy is against the law, but is it always morally wrong?
That's a conversation for another time, Sarah. But I think it's important to keep these issues in mind as we explore the future of digital content sharing.
Absolutely. We'll leave you with that thought. What do you think? Is piracy a victimless crime? Is it justified in some cases? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.
Thanks for joining us on this journey through the digital Wild West, and we'll see you next time on Smart and Crazy.
Until then, stay curious, stay crazy, and stay tuned.